This week on the Roundtable, we told you not to trust the story that ended when the Lord Ruler seemed to have died. We were right, and it gets way worse. We're talking all about Mistborn Era 1 this week on the Roundtable. That's Templar. I'm Chino. Let's go. Well, welcome back to the Roundtable, and I am joined by Templar again. Templar, how was vacation, my guy?
It was good. It was nice. A lot of driving, but we had a nice time. We went to the East Coast and did a little whale watching and hung out, saw some sights, saw the ocean. It was fun.
Actually saw a whale? Like that is like not something many people can say.
Yeah, you never know when you go whale watching, right? So I went whale watching in Iceland many years ago, and we saw like something at a very long distance. And this time we went out and we saw two whales. They're called minke whales. And they got quite close to the boat. So we saw them like pretty close up. We saw a bunch of harbor porpoise, which are like kind of small dolphins. Same family of dolphins anyway. And then we saw a bunch of seals. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Had a good time. Generally had a nice time. It's a nice area. We went to St. John, New Brunswick. So yeah,
awesome.
Enjoyed it. Glad to be back though.
Do they chum the water for the whales, or you just kind of go out there hoping that the whale is going to pop out?
They're baleen whales, so they don't. At least those ones were. There might be some there that aren't. There are sharks in the Bay of Fundy, which is where we were doing the whale watching. But no, they don't. They didn't chum the water or anything to try to attract sharks or anything.
Okay.
But yeah, they're baleen whales, so they just eat like plankton and stuff like that. And just things that it filters out. So, but they got quite close. We saw two different ones. They're pretty cool. So hey.
That's awesome. Well, I do want to thank Pastor Dalton, a.k.a. Druzi, for joining us. And if you did not catch that, make sure to go. We were talking about Widow's Bay, which is probably Apple TV's best show right now. Silo Season 3 just started. I haven't dipped in. Have you dipped in back into Season 3 yet?
No, you bringing that up just made me think about it again, that I need to watch. And look forward to some episodes on that, but probably... because they're only coming out one a week, we're not going to do one on every episode.
No.
But it's 10, so I think we're going to do 3 and then 1 on the final. So we'll do batches of 3 episodes, and then we'll do an episode on the final, episode 10, for the finale for the season. So
yes. And also, this is the first episode you're going to be able to hear on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all that. We are turning this into an audio format as well. So if you want to take our lovely faces on the go, so you don't have to actually see us because our faces might actually have been made for the radio, that's fine. You can put us in your pockets and take us with you. You get all the Roundtable goodness. So make sure to hit subscribe and share that with a friend as well. We are dipping into Era 1 of Mistborn. Brandon Sanderson, there it is. He came locked and freaking loaded. For those listening,
ready with the books.
Yeah, man. He brought those in. He was before we were starting. He was like trying to figure out: do I hold him like cards? Do I hold him like in an abstract form? Nah, he just went straight up Arnold Schwarzenegger on those bad boys. Mistborn Era 3 or Era 1 of first 3 books, and. Quick warning before we go any further, this is a full trilogy spoiler episode. I'll put this in the description as well. Top to bottom, spoilers are going to abound here. If you haven't finished all 3 books, bail out now and actually go watch our Final Empire episode instead, which was the very first Mistborn book. You can catch the card up here if you're on desktop or in the doobly-doos below. Go watch that, and we'll be here when you get done with all 3 books. You should probably go read them. Era 1 is this big arc that spans roughly, I think it's like 2 or 3 years. It's not a whole lot of time. It's 2 or 3 years, and then there's a big time gap at the end of book 3. But we're not going to go through all of like how allomancy works and how hemalurgy works and how ferromancy works and all that other stuff. What I do want to ask you, though, Templar, is this is your first dip into a Sanderson, sort of the Sanderson verse. Mm-hmm. How was it? Like overall, give me general impressions. How was it diving in here?
I enjoyed it. We talked about it back in March when we did Mistborn, The Final Empire. That was our March read for our book club, which is ongoing. We are doing Piranesi this month, which Chino is excited about.
So I cannot tell you how excited I am.
Just has so many things to say about it.
I do.
So we do a book every month, and Final Empire was our book for March. I had never read Sanderson before. In theory, I'm still reading through The Wheel of Time, so I figured maybe eventually I'd get to the Sanderson stuff there. That'd be my first exposure. But no, we jumped in. I'd heard enough about it, and I enjoyed it. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Quite enjoyed the first book. And then since then, I've just been reading book 2. I jumped into book 2 fairly quickly after book 1. Read it, took some time with it, didn't like rush through it. And I took a break after book 2, which we can talk about. Book 2, I think, is kind of weak. I think book 2 suffers from middle book itis, middle book syndrome in this trilogy. So it took me a while to get into book 3, and I started it, didn't get that far. But then when I was on vacation that we were speaking about, I jumped back in and went through and read most of it, like 2/3 or 3/4 of it, just while I was away on vacation, finished it up. Overall, I'm quite positive on it, I would say. I think it lands well. I don't know if Hero of Ages, I've heard of this concept of the Sander Lanch, that, Sanderson sets all these things up, and then the end of his books, just tons of stuff happens.
So much stuff happening,
everything's going on, and I guess Hero of Ages counts for that.
It does.
Because to be honest, probably 3/4 of the way, or maybe 2/3 of the way through Hero of Ages, I was like, okay, like this is maybe like a 7 or something. Like, I was all right with it, but then it landed very strong. At least emotionally, I think it landed very strong, and that bumped it up. And so overall, I think it was very good. I understand why it's recommended to people as a sort of introduction to fantasy, like a sort of modern introduction to fantasy, which we talked about for the Final Empire. The whole trilogy, I think, is very accessible. It's high fantasy, but it's not really epic fantasy in the sense that it's not. It's a decent scale, but it's not like Stormlight, where it's a whole gigantic world that you're getting into. Really, there is a world, but it's mostly just a couple cities that you ever really see. So I'd say it's small enough that it's still accessible for people who don't want to dive into a giant thing. But overall impressions are good. I had a good time with it. I'm glad I finished it. We both just started Era 2. And so it ended well enough that it made me interested to jump into Era 2. So yeah, overall impressions are good. I had a nice time with it. I think book 2 is kind of weak in my opinion, but it's okay. It's solid. And then book 1 and book 3, I think, are both quite good.
All right, so let's get into some of the things here. There's a lot of questions that happen. That you start to ask yourself about who these things are. Is it a character? Is it a force? Is it a town? Is it some sort of alloy? Like, what is actually happening here? And I want to start with the Lord Ruler, because at the end of the Final Empire, the Lord Ruler is, he is Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader all rolled into one, and he gets killed and opens up kind of this well, essentially, of power. And that haunts, he doesn't do it intentionally. Well, there's a whole long story there, but there's this sort of power that's unleashed upon the world. And it's sort of the thing that Vin is chasing the rest of the story, trying to figure this power out, and Ellen to a certain extent. Ellen is trying to be the emperor to take things down. But I want to talk about the Lord Ruler. Book 1 presents him as this sort of like unkillable and near mythic tyrant, I think. Vin kills him, like I said, and then we learn a little bit more about his backstory. His name is Rashek, or Rashek, however you would pronounce it. He was never the person that the prophecy was actually intended to hold the power. He was like the mule, right? He was like the backpack carrier of the actual hero.
He was a guy. He was like a Sherpa, yeah.
Yeah. But he ended up seizing the power that was meant for the true Hero of Ages. And the Hero of Ages was supposed to stop Ruin from really collapsing the world in on itself. That's what the Hero of Ages was supposed to be to do. And then the Lord Ruler held this power for 1,000 years or something like that. Yeah, about 1,000 years. His tyranny is sort of reframed, book 2 and book 3, as an attempt to allow humanity to survive. He invents these wraiths, but he also invents the Koloss, but he also inadvertently starts the ash mounts from spitting ash for thousands of years. And it makes him into this like fuller character. And my question for you is the Lord Ruler actually a character, or is he like a symbol? Is he like a force? Like where does that land for you?
At the end of book 1, we talked about it. And in book 1, he's a force. He's not really a character. You don't get much of him.
Right.
The interaction with him is extremely brief. Like Vin has a very brief kind of back and forth with him at the end of the book, and that's about it. R.I.P. Kelsier, that you get the fight and the
although Kelsier comes back. Kelsier comes back, right? In book 3, he comes back. Dun dun dun. Sort of. Evil Kelsier.
It's interesting that his characterization is all after he's dead. Like him being a character, he's a force in book 1. By the end of book 3, I would say he is kind of a character. We do get some sense of him, but all of the characterization is after he's already dead and out of the story, which is a very interesting way to go about fleshing out a character after they're already gone. But it's well done in terms of revealing all these motivations that, like, I don't know if it fully excuses the things that he did, but it certainly has it make much more sense in terms of why he did the things that he did, why he made the decisions that he made, and that there was a purpose to it. And he wasn't just like a tyrant for the sake of being a tyrant. Like he organized society for stability because he knew he basically had to wait for this power to come back so that he could then have another chance to kind of use it. Right. So it's interesting. I would say, at the end of book 1, he's a force, but at the end of book 3, I think he is a character. I think you learn enough about him, why he did what he did, his sort of internal struggles. You get these messages from him in the vaults, which is interesting into some of his mind. So, I think by the end of book 3, he is a pretty well realized character, actually.
And I don't want to say he's sympathetic. He's not well. What you learn later on about Ruin and Preservation, and what you see Sazed doing, and we'll talk about Sazed in a minute, but like he feels like he is an unreliable narrator or an unreliable emperor. You know, he's corrupted by power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely type of thing. Even to the point of like you watch like is it Vin who tries to like shift the wind, and then like stuff happens. One of them, I can't remember who it was, like tries to shift the wind, but like it inadvertently causes like typhoons and monsoons and rains happening on islands. And like you go, oh, like that's interesting. And so this collection of like wraiths and this collection of people, and like, he undoubtedly did some evil things, but I also think he's a little bit of a sympathetic character at the end of book 3. And you're right, like fleshing him out in journals and in memories, that's a definite choice that like you don't really get a lot of.
No, it's an interesting way of going about it. Sympathetic, it's hard to, I don't know where I land on him. You understand why he did what he did. You could probably still make plenty of arguments that the way he went about doing things was not the right way of going about doing it. But I mean, for where it lands, it's these giant caverns that end up being what protects people, and that's who survives for then things to continue into Era 2, right? So it's interesting, and you do feel a bit for him in the sense that Ruin seemingly was in his ear talking to him that whole time. For 1,000 years, Ruin is basically like the Zane character, probably like yelling things at him and trying to get him to do this and that for 1,000 years. Like it's kind of getting tortured, right? So you do feel a bit for him, I think, in that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually didn't put that 2 and 2 together. That Ruin would have been in his ear, kind of yelling and trying to posture and do all that other stuff. That's fascinating. I want to talk about recontextualization. You used that word kind of earlier when we were talking about what we previously did in it was like episode 20 or something in our Final Empire wrap up. I want to ask you the big question, like what moment or moments recontextualized book 1 for you overall? I had one that stuck out to me, and just to kind of kick it off, I think in Well of Ascension, Vin releases this sort of like trapped force, right? Like all of a sudden this Ruin character is out. And that recontextualizes everything that happened in the Final Empire. But then in Hero of Ages, it's revealed that the mist itself is not actually what you think it is. It's actually Ruin's instrument. And it's kind of this like, it's making people sick, and it is intentional decay, and it's not just kind of like setting flavor. Like, oh, Mistborn is just like everything is kind of all this other, like this is an actual like evil force that's like dwelling on the world. So that moment kind of recontextualized everything for me. That realization. What about you? Like, what hit you?
Well, preservation's instrument, right? Because the purpose of the mist was to
preservation. To
snap the people to make them into Mistborn, right? Like that's that's the sickness they get from it. But Ruin corrupts it, so they get sicker than they're supposed to. So that's why you get this percentage of people that die. Which
16%.
16, yeah, the 16%. Which reappears so many times throughout it, and they highlight it in Hero of Ages. But recontextualize her, I mean, Vin being able to draw on the mist is interesting. The revelation of the fact that it's only when she's not wearing the earring that she can draw on it, and it's only the couple times that it gets removed where she's actually able to do that. And so she would have been able to at any point, which obviously would have made, I think, some of the fights less interesting. But the fact that it was just the spike, like the mini spike that was the earring in her ear that was keeping her from being able to draw the mist the whole time was really interesting.
Well, hold on that real quick. I was getting kind of frustrated because it's a fantasy book trope where towards the end of the book, and you know, the Sanderson avalanche or Sandolanche, whatever, all of a sudden the hero can draw on cosmic powers and becomes unkillable, you know, Super Saiyan 9000 type thing. And I was like, all right, we're really going to do this. Like, okay, I guess like I'll just read through and I'll enjoy this. But like that revelation right there was like, okay, like congratulations, Sando, you did it. Like you got through the trope, but you actually had an explanation for the trope, not just like, oh, he's Neo or she's Neo.
Yeah, and he actually, I mean, and again, I've only read this and I've seen interviews with him and stuff. It seems like Sanderson would do it this way, right? Like he would have it all planned out. Like he's a big planner. He's a big organizer in terms of his writing. So, and I appreciated that it actually was tied to something. It wasn't just random in that way. It was that presence of Ruin that she wasn't able to draw in the mists. Other recontextualizing.
I honestly, and I'll dog food this one a little bit, but the idea that underneath all of the main cities were dug these caverns really recontextualized what the Lord Emperor had been doing for those the actual I can't even think right now. The Lord Ruler, excuse me, had been doing for those 1,000 years. Like he was actually preparing a population for life after Ruin. And that to me like was like a big, like I would go back and read book 1 with that in mind now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his attitude is very much one of like, you just don't understand, like none of you understand, which is what he says at the end of book 1, right? When he's dying, he says like, you don't realize what you've done, you've doomed yourself. But even he didn't know fully. He just kind of did what he could. He didn't even really know fully how to win, because like Ruin's influence was still there over that time. But it is interesting to consider then that I don't think the preservation power comes back because he dies. I think it just comes back because it was supposed to come back anyway. So it's interesting to think of what would have happened had Vin not killed him, and what would he have done with it the second time. Like, so if the power had come back into the well again, would he have, like, what would he have done to the world? Would he have tried to remake it like it was again? And as we see Sazed do at the end, but Sazed has the knowledge to do it. Did the Lord Ruler have the knowledge? Like, what would have happened then? Because he would have taken the power for himself again, and then what would he have done with it? It was interesting.
That is interesting. I guess I didn't think of that. I want to talk about Ruin and Preservation then. They are kind of the opposite of the Lord Ruler. The Lord Ruler is an actual person that gets personified as a force. These are forces that get personified as people. In book 1, the mist and the ash are kind of eerie. they're ambient, they're unexplained, and then we get book 2, and then there's this the revelation, especially in book 3, that these things are like the direct expression of these 2 cosmic shards, which we'll talk about shards in a few minutes, of ruin and preservation, who are the shards, and they've been actively influencing events, and then in some cases they've been speaking to characters directly. Preservation has been communicating with Kelsier vaguely, and then also Vin, but ruin has been speaking to a lot of people that have spikes in them and all sorts of stuff. Do ruin and preservation work as literal characters for you, or should they have remained sort of like the Deus Ex Machina forces?
Yeah, I don't know. They're kind of interesting. The fact that when they die, there are these bodies that drop out of, like, that there are actual physical bodies for them is interesting, and I think never really addressed in Era 1. Like what they are
elsewhere.
or fair enough. But in terms of like who those bodies actually are, did they claim that power? Did it, however that works, maybe I'd have to read Stormlight to get that information, or maybe there'll be more about it in the Era 2 that we're getting into. But preservation isn't really a character. I mean, it's kind of a force. Like, you get a little bit of interaction with it. You do understand some of the motivations, like stabbing Elend in the hopes that Vin will take the power to heal him, which is interesting at the end of Well of Ascension. And then we get the brief interaction of Elend with the Mist Spirit in Hero of Ages before it kind of finally vanishes. But I would say no. Ruin gets more of an actual characterization. I think there's more going on there. It does feel like a personify, like, does feel like an actual person, not just a force that exists in the world, where preservation kind of does. And that seems intentional. I mean, in Hero of Ages, they say that creating the prison for Ruin essentially consumed kind of the person of preservation, not necessarily the power of preservation, but the sort of intellect, like the sort of identity of it was sort of consumed in that creation. So that makes sense then, that preservation, because what's left of it is its body in the mist and its power, and that's about it. The sort of person isn't really there anymore, whereas Ruin, its power was constrained, but you had this, like, the intellect or the intelligence still operating.
Well, this is where I could dive into spoilers about other parts of the Sandoverse, and we'll get there later. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, because I do hope eventually you will read Stormlight, the first arc of the Stormlight Archive, which is the first 5 books, because there is definitely an explanation for the people thing that you're talking about. And I had read 4 of the 5 books before I had read the Mistborn series, 4 of the 5 Stormlight books before I had read Mistborn. So I kind of went in backwards order to what's usually recommended. And so when I saw those people drop out of the air, I was like, oh, okay. Like, you're holding true. All of this stuff is happening on different planets, but you're holding true to some core things, and come to find out, like, oh no, all of these things are tied together. And in a very... You're right, like the planning thing. I have to. It's the one thing, like, I love about Sando. Like, this is not season 5 and season 6 of Lost, where the writers are just kind of throwing crap at a wall and be like, I don't know, we got to tie that one up eventually. Let's figure it out. This actually feels like my guy has a room full of Post-it notes with string, and it just looks like the Charlie from Always Sunny meme, just like the smoking the cigarette and that's what it looks like in his room. Very much looks like that. I want to move to Sazed, or Sazed. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just going to call him Sazed. He starts as a terraceman they carry a lot of power, but you don't find out about that power until later. In book 1, he is sort of like the enslaved race. It feels like they are the ones that were castrated. They had some sort of thing that, like, the Lord Ruler was scared of, and they didn't know. It's never really explained, like, what's happening here. So they're castrated, and they cannot breed, and, like, they're an oppressed people and all these other things. In the Hero of Ages, we see Sazed after this sort of major personal loss. He has this crisis of faith, and Sazed sort of, like, his remit in the entire trilogy is to carry the world's religions. For what reason, we don't know. We find out later why it is, but we don't know why. He's just carrying all of these. And then he discovers this Hero of Ages prophecy and how it was altered by Ruin, which I think is also going back to Ruin. Like, it's very fun that Ruin can alter writing, because like when you start to see Sazed and what's his love interest name? I can't remember her name.
Tyndall.
Yeah, there we go. When you start to see them like put the pieces together, that was very cool. That was very, very cool. But the very final climax, Sazed combines the powers of Ruin and Preservation, and then ascends to this sort of like new godlike being who rebuilds the world. This is, as I was doing some research, this is like one of the more debated arcs in all of the Sandoverse right now. Some read it as like the emotional core of the trilogy, and then others think it's like this faith crisis to godhead trope that kind of happens too fast. What do you think? Is it one of those extremes, or is it somewhere in the middle?
I don't think it happens too fast. I was getting tired of his crisis of faith, to be honest. So.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, I guess it's not even that long. Maybe it's because I started reading Hero of Ages and then waited a long time and then finished it. Maybe it felt longer to me than it actually is.
Maybe.
Because his crisis of faith happens at the end of Well of Ascension with the battle when Tyndall was killed. And so then that leads to him questioning everything in Hero of Ages and he progressively is going through all of his religions that he studied, basically kind of like tearing them apart and poking holes in them, with his ultimate conclusion sort of just being that you're discounting faith entirely, right? Like that you have to, that there's like a leap you have to take, or that there's something you have to do there. I like the arc a lot. I think he's great in book 1. I thought he's great in book 2. I guess it is only one book, so I can't say it's too long, but I was kind of getting tired of some of his
mopiness.
Yeah, in book 3, even though I get it, and I think it is earned, but I would say as we got deep into that book, I was starting to get tired of it. But the payoff, I think, is great. I mean, the fact that, because ultimately he's debating, like he was thinking about throwing out his metal mines, and like he was going to cast all. He's like, what good is all of this? And then it being the knowledge from these religions, not the scientific knowledge, but like these religions that study different things, like the tides or the stars, or like, and mapped these things out, that what allows him to fix the problems with the world, that he can like put the planet back where it's supposed to be because of this one religion that studied the stars, and he has what the positions of the stars in the skies were before it was moved. Like, that's such a great payoff of this like internal grappling that he's had with what the point of these religions are. If there's no one who believes them, what's the point of him teaching them, and the faith element? Like there's a ton there, but it worked for me. I thought it was great. Like that was one of the elements that I really liked about the Sanderlander, about the end of something that you didn't expect to happen. And then also the flip that Vin wasn't the Hero of Ages. Sazed is the Hero of Ages. And you can see how like the prophecies, which can be kind of interpreted to apply to different people, how it applies to him, and that he's ultimately the one who brings these things together. And by not Vin self-sacrifice, taking the power, slamming it into Ruin to kind of destroy both of them, but then Sazed being able to use it in a sort of balanced way where it doesn't come into conflict with each other. You know, so he goes from being very much on one side, totally embracing all these things, on the other side, and then you end with this sort of balance that I think is nice. I think that's just well executed as is in terms of Sanderson's writing and planning all that out. So for me, I get that it might not work because it is quick. Like Vin takes this power, you think she's going to figure out some way to beat Ruin or something, and it's like, no, she's going to sacrifice herself to destroy them both, to release the power, and then he's going to take it up, and it's fast, and then he fixes things, and it's like, okay. But it works for me. I like it. I liked it.
I agree. What didn't work for me, and it's not Sazed, it is Spook. I could not get on board with Spook, and I don't know why. I understand the whole story. I don't know. I like that whole. Anytime I would flash back to Spook, I got a little uncomfortable, and I couldn't put my finger on why. It felt just a little like he was this sort of like anterior character in book 1. You barely see him in book 2, and then book 3, all of a sudden he's like super powerful. That felt a little unearned to me. I think maybe that's what it was. Now, granted, he's overdosing on metal, and he's turning essentially into an addict, which the personification, or not personification, the personalization of him as an addict, like I totally get, but at the same time, like he felt like he was being used, which he was. Obviously, Ruin was using him. But it felt like he was being used to like pull that part of that whatever town. I can't remember what that town that was. That was in Fadric City or whatever. But he was used. Yeah, there it is, right there. It was used to pull Urto like into the story a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. How did you feel about Spook?
I don't buy that he's going to be the leader at the end. Like I don't buy.
There's that too.
I don't mind his arc. I think it's okay. Like the sort of side character gaining this confidence, thinking he's not important, the sort of self-deprecating, like he's really always kind of tearing himself up, but gaining confidence and then getting this relationship with, Deirdre, is it? Is it the citizen sister? I'm blanking on her name. But I like that. And then the self-sacrifice that he goes into, to release the water to kind of save the city when they were trying to overthrow it, and that kind of switch was nice. So it's okay. I don't really buy at the end that he's going to be the one to be the leader of everyone, though. I feel like doesn't really work for me, because seems to be the suggestion that at the end, when I guess all of these underground structures are moved together, and so all 5 of them, I guess, come out, or 6 of them come out together. There's this idea, I think, that he is going to kind of end up being the leader, and I don't know if it's really earned. I don't know if he demonstrates that level of leadership ability that they're going to like make this guy the emperor or of the new city or whatever. Like I just don't, and maybe that's not what happens, but that seems to be the suggestion. And I don't buy that part of it, but his arc overall, I don't mind. It's okay. I found the other stuff with Vin and Ellen and Fadrix more interesting, but that's not necessarily surprising either.
Do you want to hear a little bit of a spoiler?
Okay. Minor spoiler.
According to Steris, we know Steris from book 1 of the new arc, Mistborn Era 2. Steris is the sort of, well, I don't know what she is yet. I just know that she got kidnapped. That's all I know. But according to Steris, Spook ruled as an emperor for a century before stepping down from power, after which Elendel was no longer supposed to exercise direct authority over the rest of the Elendel Basin. There you go. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, also, I don't buy that. I don't buy that Spook becomes emperor.
No, but apparently he did try to ascertain whether Harmony had a god medal or not. The girl was named Beldre, by the way. That was her name.
Okay, Beldre. I mean, it's interesting. He gets made into a Mistborn at the end, which is cool, because then when you do get references to the Lord Mistborn in Era 2.
Yep. Which we're assuming is Spook. We're not that far yet.
Which we're assuming is Spook, because we're not that far. I'm only halfway through.
And this is not a. We probably maybe will do Mistborn Era 2 if we get. I think there's 4 books in Era 2. We might do a breakdown of that. But there's an interesting scene in like chapter 5 or 6 or whatever where the main character, or one of the protagonists, Wax is his name, has written out an entire genealogy of people going back to the Lord Mistborn, and like, oh, okay, we're just laying this right out here right now, Sando, aren't we? We're just gonna draw all the lines, whatever we can. So I did appreciate that. Last question for me, and then I want to talk about Sanderson. But are there any choices made in these books that you'd push back on? There's no single right answer to this. Some of the stuff I found in research, like Vin's death, is a choice that they didn't agree with. Obviously, we talk about the Sazed's ascension. The introduction of hemalurgy really got people kind of up in arms. Not up in arms, but there were people pushing back on like, why would you have this blood magic thing like so late in the series? Why wouldn't you introduce this in a thing? And like, I kind of felt that way about hemalurgy, if I'm being honest, but also like that's, you talk about recontextualization, that recontextualizes all of book one, because now all of these guys with spikes in them and all of these guys with everything, it makes a little more sense rather than, well, these guys just have spikes in their eyes and in their chests. Like, that's crazy. Any choices that you would have pushed back on?
I don't mind that. Yeah, it does get introduced late. This series is kind of funny to me because it feels big and small at the same time. Because I mentioned it is a high fantasy series. It's not that epic because you really only are ever in Luthadel, and you get a little bit here and there in each of the books. Obviously, in book 3, you get Fadrix and then Orto.
Yeah.
As well, but the world never feels very big, and things also move really fast. Like, everything kind of happens in Hero of Ages, because Well of Ascension, and this goes back to my problem with Well of Ascension, I think Well of Ascension, not enough goes on because it's all politicking. Essentially, it's all politicking and armies staring at each other. And then the battle at the end of Well of Ascension is pretty good. But for me, it wasn't enough to justify Well of Ascension, which to me, very little of anything happened.
Yes.
So it's funny. I almost think the series could afford to be a bit longer and you could get into more of the actual world. Like, so it's not necessarily a specific choice that I have a problem with, more than I get that he had Stormlight and he wants this to be more kind of direct and less grand in scale, but I would have personally liked to have seen more of the world, and I wish Well of Ascension had been more about seeing more of the world, like coming out of Mistborn, Final Empire, growing the world more and seeing more of what's going on in these different dominances and these different regions, which are mentioned, but we never really get that much about them. Like, there's never really that much said about them. I would have been interested to see some of the different cultures there, some of the different, different cultures. I guess because essentially the Lord Ruler made everything kind of one culture everywhere. I guess there is less of that to do, but it just feels like the world is very, very small for the series. And despite my constant jokes about Sanderson writing these massive tomes in Stormlight, I almost wish the Era 1 had been a bit longer. Like, we could have had a little bit more time with them. It feels almost rushed in a way. And maybe again, that's because I think I didn't really like Well of Ascension. Like, it's fine that you have to do so much in Hero of Ages to wrap things up that, like, I almost would have liked if maybe Well of Ascension had a bit more going on, and then maybe if you even have another book before Hero of Ages to see the deterioration of the world more. And more of the fighting and more of the kind of struggle against ruin. Because even with one book, I mean, Hero of Ages it's not that long. It's not that short. Like, you know, this paperback is 700 pages. So, I mean, it's certainly not short, but he has a ton to do in that book.
Yep.
And so I almost like the decision for it to be a trilogy, maybe like almost like I would almost prefer if it had been a little longer and we could have done a bit more with it, because it feels too rushed to me. But again, that goes back to, I think Well of Ascension just really suffers as a middle book.
I agree. If you want somebody to write more, Sanderson is your guy. He has no problems with any of that. My guy puts out, it feels like 15,000 words a day, whether it's in tweets or in movie scripts or in books or in blogs or whatever. He is incredibly prolific. I think I mostly agree with you. I have, again, the benefit of coming in the reverse order. And again, I'm going to say this again. The 4 out of the 5 books, and now all of the 5 that I've read of Stormlight, are incredibly they are vast. They cover an entire planet, corner to corner and species to species, and they get incredibly in depth, and you know, like, you're in a world. And he does very good with the world building, but you know you're in a world. It felt like a breath of fresh air to me, honestly. the containedness of it felt a little, and then anytime it was like something was happening, it was like, okay, there's this army that's coming from this far off city, and Fadric City is indeterminate amount of days away, 2 to 3 days away, although it seems like Vin and Elend can just like skip there on these posts quickly. You know, they can get there in an hour or 5 hours or whatever, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty cool way to travel, like in just big jumping arcs. That must be pretty fun. But so on the one hand, I agree with you. Like I could have used more of the world building. On the other hand, it felt very refreshing to have like, no, we're going to do the story here, and we're not going to be jumping from character to character, from species to species, from conversation to conversation. Like we're going to stay pretty contained. It's one of the things that has made Mistborn kind of stick out in my head, and the events of it stick out in my head. Versus like Stormlight's great, but there's some stuff that gets kind of muddy in there. Like there's, and I've read now all 5 of them twice. And like, there's just still some stuff that gets a little like, I don't know. I can't remember when that happened. That might've been in book 3, might've been in book 4. I don't know. This could have been in this one city, could have been in this other world. I don't know. I want to ask you about Sanderson then. Has your read on his prose changed? Has your read on, you had said that it gets the job done. Has your read on him changed, or is it still, it gets the job done and you're okay with that?
Yep. Still the same. I didn't notice a significant shift. I'm sure, like, because Mistborn is a relatively early book for him, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
So I'm sure his writing has improved. I'm sure if I like broke down some of the stuff from Mistborn to Hero of Ages, there'd be some differences. But I think at least for this trilogy, I think his prose, yeah, it gets the job done. I don't think it's anything mind-blowing or like incredibly descriptive. Like his descriptions are nice and he does a good job with them. So it's not an insult in any way. I think it's very accessible. And I think it's kind of middle of the road in a lot of ways, in that it's not overly descriptive. It's not overly flowery. It's not kind of overly anything. It's just, it gets the job done. You know what's happening. He does a good job with dialogue and whatever. So yeah, I mean, his prose doesn't blow me away, but I also don't know if that's what he's going for. And I think for as sort of broad appeal as these books are, I think that totally works. So
yeah. Anything else on this? Any other questions, any other comments, any other concerns that pop up when you start to think about the full trilogy here?
No, I think that about covers it. I mean, I think for me, Mistborn or the Final Empire is about like an 8. Well of Ascension is probably like a 7, maybe 6.5 to a 7, something in there. I still like the world and the characters enough that that kind of carries the fact that I'm not really interested in what's going on in Well of Ascension. I'm never into the Zane character. At no point did I ever care about that character at all. And there was a lot of time spent on that character in Well of Ascension. And so I'm just like, anytime it cut to him or cut to Vin dealing with him, I'm like, I don't care. Yep. I'm not interested in any of this. Well, there was
this weird romance thing that was happening there too that I just didn't like
any of it.
No.
She almost had me in the sense that like, I didn't think she was going to run off with him, but like, I wondered if she was going to go with him or something at the end of the book. So he got me in that sense, but I wasn't happy about it because I didn't like the character.
Right.
And then Hero of Ages, it's tough because I think like 3/4 of the book for me is probably like a 7, but then it ends really strong. So the end probably brings it up to like, oh man, maybe even as high as a 9 in parts. Like,
wow.
So Hero of Ages is probably an 8 or an 8.5, somewhere in that with the ending.
Okay.
And maybe I'm being a little overly harsh with it, but
so overall trilogy, like 7, 8 around there?
Probably like an 8. I think it's strong enough, I think, to say the overall trilogy is probably like an 8 for me. It's good. I have my gripes. Nothing crazy though, and I would definitely recommend it to people. Like I understand why it gets recommended as intro fantasy stuff, like intro to modern types of fantasy. I absolutely understand why. And I saw people disagreeing about this. Maybe it was I'm in a couple book club servers, or it might have been in LTN's Discord. Shout out Love Thy Nerd. There was a bit of a discussion about whether Mistborn, like whether the Final Empire is a standalone book, or you can like read it as a standalone. I think you totally can. Like I understand why you wouldn't do that, because it's certainly, even at the end of it, it said like it absolutely sets up that there's more. But I think you could just read The Final Empire as a standalone book and move on. Like I don't think it is kind of a wrapped up. It's a wrapped up story, and then obviously we know it gets into a lot more, and there's a ton of connections and all this stuff. To me, you can just read it by itself. So if someone's interested, you don't even necessarily have to commit to the whole trilogy. You can just read The Final Empire, and if you like it a lot, you'd want to continue, and maybe you think it's okay and you don't want to continue, and that's fine, but you're not going to be left hanging story-wise, not really. So, I mean, obviously, we've had a ton of spoilers here, so I doubt anyone who is in that situation is still listening here, but I think you could absolutely read it as just a book on its own, and that would be it.
He did say, this is his blog on his website, BrandonSanderson.com. Like all of my, this is book for book 2, Well of Ascension. Like all of my series, I wrote book 1 of Mistborn to stand out on its own, yet lead into potential sequels. Unlike all previous series, which I wrote when I was trying to break into publishing, I actually got to write the sequel. So that's how he does things. He writes book 1, not knowing if he's going to, which is great. He does end it by saying, I tried very hard not to just make this a bridge from book 1 to book 3. I wanted to be its own book with a distinct feel and plot of its own. I hope you find it enjoyable, which, you know, I think we all felt that like it was a little bit of a bridge. It did not have Empire Strikes Back. It very much had every other second child syndrome.
To me, it does feel just like a bridge book. So
yeah,
I appreciate it. And if someone's into the Vin character and someone is really into all the politicking, and there wasn't enough. To me, it was too repetitive and there just wasn't enough going on. And the final battle wasn't enough to salvage it. Like the end of Hero of Ages didn't salvage it, because I did like a lot of Hero of Ages, but really put a stamp on it. And the end of Well didn't do that for me. But I don't want to complain that much, because generally I like the whole trilogy. And I think Well isn't like a bad book or anything. I just thought it was a little bit like not quite as interesting as the other two.
So next up, Way of Kings for you, huh? Stormlight Archive, book 1.
Next up is we are already reading Era 2 of Mistborn, so that's what's up right now. We're reading Alloy of Metal, or
Alloy of Law.
The Alloy of Law, yeah.
Yeah, and
that's what we're currently reading, which I'm enjoying.
It is a completely different book. It is a completely different, 300 years after the Mistborn trilogy. It is a completely different setting. There's humor. There's way more humor than I think you'd think. There's like legit dad jokes from one of the characters. There's a heist crime thing happening. There's like guns and bombs, and it is unlike any Sando that I've read, and I kind of am enjoying it in a way I did not think I was going to.
They're also short too. I mean, book 1 is only like 350 pages or something. Like, I guess it would depend on the version, but they also seem, I think book 4 gets a little longer, but yeah, they're pretty short. They move quick. I like the banter for the most part. The revelation in Hero of Ages that there were firearms and that the Lord Ruler did away with them.
Yep.
Like he had suppressed that firearm technology had existed previously, and he had suppressed it, was an interesting one.
Yep.
But then we get that back here, and the kind of gunslinger vibes, like sort of crossed with like 1920s, like the Wild West era sort of ending. You get these two different worlds. I'm into it. I think it's really cool. I was telling you, it's got shades of Dresden Files. It's not really totally Dresden, but it has shades of Dresden in the sort of supernatural investigator vibe that Wax has. So yeah, I'm into it. So Mistborn Era 2 is up now. Maybe eventually I'll try Stormlight, but I'm committing to nothing.
I think you should. Even if it's just the first book, if for no other reason, then you need to meet some of the other magic system that happens and how it's just different. It's not ingesting things. It is different, and it's enjoyable. And I don't know. I'm a big proponent of all of that. So I overall out of 10, I like Templar probably an 8, maybe even 8.5 out of 10 for the whole trilogy. I think it's definitely worth reading. I think it's required reading for fantasy fans, honestly. Like this would be, especially high fantasy fans, I think this is required reading. It's short, like you'll get through it in probably a month. You can cruise through all 3 of these books, especially if you're like us and you're just like, this is great. I'm going to nerd out to these things. Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up? We've talked a lot about these books.
We have? No, I think that does it.
Awesome.
It's good. Looking forward to Era 2.
Looking forward to Era 2. If you're interested in books, we've got this fantastic book up right now called Piranesi. You can join our book club in our Discord and read Piranesi. It's definitely a book of all time. It is definitely one of the books of all time. And yeah, I finished it today, and I am whelmed. I'm very whelmed. Yeah, I'm very, very whelmed. So anything else before we clean up here, Templar?
No, that'll do it.
Awesome.
Check out the Discord, vote in the bracket.
Yep, doodly
Thanks
doos below.
for listening in. We appreciate it.
Love you guys. We'll see you next episode. Goodbye.
See ya.